purity,
Yeah.
our love for one another, our support for one another. And that is a sad road that we went down, but I really see that we're coming back to it. We're coming back to that understanding and trusting one another and believing in one another. And again, that's that respect and the responsibility to freedom.
Yeah, I'm starting to see a little bit of that trend as well, where people are getting along a little bit better. It's not so tense, but yet there's still some little infighting here and there. And I think everybody will wake up and realize, there's a much bigger picture out there that we can all work together towards and fight for.
Well, and I agree. I don't want to expand on that just a moment
Yeah,
because it's
please.
like what I was talking about with family. I have diverse family. We have different values and different views, but
Hmm.
ultimately we stand on the same goals, and that is for us to be united and for us to more opportunity and better outcomes. So we work together on those goals. And what I see in the community is like we forget that we have the same goals.
Yeah.
We forget that we have the same end result that we're aiming for. And so I'm going to come at it from this side, you're going to come at it from that side, and we're going to get there so long as we keep our eye on that.
Hmm.
What I'm seeing it's happening in community is that we've taken our eye off the goal
Yeah.
and we started looking at each other, and instead of saying, hey, you know what, we all stumble, we all struggle, we all have days that we just don't feel like we're enough, and I'm going to come along beside you and I'm going to help you. But instead we trip each other and we fight each other and we knock each other down, and then there's a time that people actually celebrate when they see someone fail.
Yeah.
And I talked about some of my experience of having been staff for the House of Representatives. The best day of my career working for the House was when I sat on the rostrum and I looked out at 100 elected members that were sent to represent their communities. And I looked at every one of those faces and I had this awesome realization that not a single one of them wanted to see me fail in my job.
Mm.
And when I had that feeling, I knew that I would be successful in every endeavor I did working for the House of Representatives
Yeah.
because I knew that they weren't there to see me fail. And I brought that home with me. And I want to see that for our entire community. That when we wake up in the morning, we're not saying, oh, somebody's out there to see me fail. No, they're out there to see me succeed. And that's in everything from the school boards to the county commissioners to the council members to the person in the grocery store, the person who's serving us. I want everybody to feel like my goal is for them to be successful.
Yeah. No, I love that position. And of course, there's that line, divided we fall. To take that to an extreme, I've heard my mentor say a few times, Andy Frisella, in the business world, he says, look, if China came to attack us, they're not just going to attack the Republicans or the Democrats. They're going to attack all of us. So we all need to come together and bring this country back to where it should be. I'm going to move into what normally would be a very controversial issue in several states, and it's the top of your on the issues on your card, and that's pro-life. And I want to compliment you, first of all, for having that on your card and making that a top priority for you. And I know that this is faith-based, but it's very bold to have a position on pro-life. And I come from a place where that would be taboo to put, like instantly you're not going to get elected. So talk to me about pro-life and what it means to you and what your fight looks like.
Wow, pro life. So that's not just a stance, that has been my life. I have opened crisis centers and shelters, I've worked in crisis pregnancy centers, and I have spent a lot of my career not just helping somebody through a difficult time, but giving them the tools and the resources so that they can become successful.
Mm-hmm.
Pro-life, it's not just about saving the baby. For me, pro-life is about saving the mom and restoring the family.
Yeah.
And so I sorry to stumble. It's very impactful in my life. Had a crisis pregnancy,
Hmm.
and my son is the pride and joy.
Yeah.
I am so glad that I am the mom that I became because other people believed in me. And after that, I felt it was absolutely my duty to believe in other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a sister that was put up for adoption. My mom chose not to have an abortion, and I'm proud of her for that. I love my sister. She's amazing. This year was the first time I've ever walked in a pro-life march. Downtown Kalispell, you were there, and I thank you for that. I brought my daughters with me. And when you're involved with something and really understand the dynamics of it, it really makes a difference, not only in your opinion, but how you approach other people and how you look at how naive some can be. What's interesting, Flathead 411, uh, there's a beautiful post about the march and what was going on, but a lot of people had comments. They said, well, men shouldn't be marching. They don't know. And, what do these people know about, my situation? If they had come to the meeting in the morning, they would understand that there were so many moms there that either gave up kids for adoption or had an abortion and regretted it, or the list goes on and on, or men that are suffering. My brother gave up, or he and his girlfriend decided in high school to have an abortion, and he's in his 50s. He mourns every year on that date. We're talking 36 years later, every year on that date. You talk about a man hurting. So I am so proud of you for having this on there. Excuse me for saying that, but I just think it's an incredible position, especially a father with two daughters. So you can expand, or we can leave it at that and move on to
I,
the
I,
next one.
I did want to challenge you on language for just a minute. Not
Yeah,
that I don't want to invade anybody's freedom to use words, but I also want to say that words matter.
yeah,
And nobody has ever given up a child. They've made a plan.
yeah.
And so I respect and honor your mom that she made a plan
Mm-hmm.
to give life.
Yeah,
And that was probably one of the most difficult decisions she could have ever made. And what an honoring thing she's done. But when I hear people say, that somebody was given up, there's no giving up
yeah.
because
That's a good
your
point.
mom still to this day remembers every impression and moment that your sister was born.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is I really like to just ask people to think about when you're talking about adoption, realize that that is the most precious of plans.
Yeah,
And we decide to parent, we decide on how to adapt our life when we're going through a crisis, but also that plan to make an adoption plan is a very important part of a process for somebody, and I don't want to ever devalue
that's
that.
awesome. That's a great way to look at. Matter of fact, my wife and I met um, a new baby to somebody's family 2 weeks ago that somebody had made a plan, right? And this couple was struggling for a long time to have a child, and finally now they have a child because of somebody else's plan. And just the joy that it brought to them. It's like, wow, could you imagine if that plan was different?
And it's scriptural too,
Yeah.
because God has created a plan for our lives.
Well, let's talk about I want to talk about education choice. I skipped a couple on your list. We'll go back to them, but I want to talk about education choice because we're talking about making plans and whatnot. And of course, I'm on the school board, so education is near and dear to my heart. Let's talk about what is your position on that, and how are you looking to support the parents' role?
Absolutely, and it actually ties to one of my other points, which is local government.
Yeah.
I think that education and the school boards, that's part of that local control, local government. And I never have believed that a one size fits all is a solution for any education plan. And I know from my own experience with my kids, my oldest son had a traumatic brain injury, so his education had to look different.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't be shoved into the same plan as other students. But in Montana, we don't have any choices for that. And so that's one of the early things that I used to go to Helena for before Derek ever got elected and before I started serving over in Helena, was to speak on education choice and to get up and tell my story of how we need to make sure that families are able to make the path that is going to make their children successful. And then that's back to faith, family, freedom.
Yeah.
You know, you need to make sure that your family has the opportunity to use the tools that are in front of them. Some really great legislation that is brought in the past is, of course, the backpack vouchers.
Yeah.
There's lots of paths that have been presented, and I'm hoping as we are able to bring that legislation forward again and again, that we're going to have a time that we're going to be able to get the votes and get the governor to sign and allow us to make those choices.
You know, you brought up some really valid points, especially coming from school board. One of the things that I love about Montana as it relates to school boards is that it's the law of Montana is that the community, tells the school board how to operate. In other words, the school board should be listening to their community and what their desires are. And I think that got twisted at some point. And we're working to bring that back. But when you talk about the backpack, legislation and some of these things, I think that some people, some elected officials, have gotten a little bit backwards and they forgot about listening to the community. And you've talked a lot about, where you live and being involved in those things. And I have a lot of confidence that you're going to bring that to the table.
Well, thank you. I think also when we look at the school board elections, there needs to be some discussion. Why are we doing these elections that are on a time where people are not normally voting? There's a misconnection. And I think that we don't have as many people making those choices in the school board elections as if they were on the regular election days.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely unfortunate. It is something that we can continue to bring up. I know that legislation has been brought up in the past that would push for the elections to be put on a regular election date.
Yeah.
And I think that's still some more conversation as we're getting more in the community who are standing up and saying, whoa, I didn't know that election already passed. I thought it was coming up in the primary. And it's just this disconnect of where you vote, how you vote, when you vote. And it gives this false sense to the people who are serving on those school boards thinking that they are hearing from the district because they're not.
Yeah, and gosh, when I ran for school board and I started knocking on doors, they're like, why are you here again? Well, there's a school board election in November, right? I'm like, no, in about 15 days. Like people have, and it would be convenient to say that there's a really good reason for that, but in my opinion, it's created more confusion. So I appreciate you bringing that up because really we need to be aligned and we need to be honest and forthright with our communities and what's happening. And I think oftentimes things get buried intentionally. So anyways, I could talk about that forever. You have Second Amendment on here. We're sitting in my office with several of my preferred weapons of choice, collector items. Why is that a part of your platform?
Well, bottom line, it shall not be infringed.
That's right.
I mean, there's nothing more clear than that sentence, shall not be infringed. And I remember having a conversation with somebody who was saying that, oh, well, the Second Amendment had everything to do with squirrel hunting. And I was absolutely highly offended because it's like, do you not even understand history?
Yeah.
That is not what the Second Amendment is. And it is so ingrained in who we are as Montanans, but who I am, because I really feel that I need to be able to defend myself, and I need to be able to feel confident, and I need to be able to go squirrel hunting if I want.
That's right. Well, I bet, I've seen the joke, I bet Ukraine wish they had Second Amendment rights over there. They would have a bunch of armed citizens. The reason why I bring this up, though, is because I think that Montanans are a little bit complacent in our Second Amendment rights. In other words, I think we all realize, hey, we're good. We've got the best Second Amendment rights in the United States. Are they under attack still here, do you think? Is it something worth it going back and continuing the fight?
I think it's a fight we should always continue because as soon as you take your eye off of it, then somebody's going to be able to slip something in that is just absolutely inappropriate and unacceptable. Look at what the courts are doing with what